A little while back, I made a video about the ultimate Star Fox for Nintendo Switch 2. And a lot of the thinking behind this is that I think there's a decent amount of evidence to suggest that the next iteration of Star Fox is likely coming to Nintendo Switch 2. It's a pretty good chance, and what we might see for Star Fox on Switch 2 is going to perhaps be the best Star Fox we've ever seen. And there's a variety of reasons for this, but a lot of it simply has to do with the fact that we'll be seeing a new Star Fox on a next generation console. And so this got me thinking, well, what if we started looking at the possibilities for other game series having their ultimate version on Nintendo Switch 2? And so the next one we're going to be discussing is Mario Kart. What would the ultimate Mario Kart on Nintendo Switch 2 look like? That's what we're going to be discussing today. Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are going to be discussing the ultimate Mario Kart on Nintendo Switch 2. But before doing so, here's a brief message about today's sponsor, Cubric. Cubric is a next-level 3D world builder game available globally for iOS devices. It's free to play and the ultimate digital playground for all ages. This game appeals to the game designer in us all, and it provides us with a chance to build virtual obstacle courses for our friends and fellow gamers to enjoy. You have access to a wide range of design tools and are strongly encouraged to build anything that you can imagine. OBs come in all shapes, sizes, themes, and difficulty levels, and are as unique as Cubric players themselves. Here I've just put on the finishing touches for my own obstacle course, and I'm giving it a try. I was able to do this within the first few minutes of the game. You have a variety of options and it's pretty simple to pick up and understand. There are also different minigames you can enjoy throughout the island, like here I'm playing Disco Drop. And you can do all sorts of things to customize your avatar. Cubric is still in beta, so this is a perfect time to jump in and be an early fan. Imagine saying you were one of the first players to experience Cubric and actually got to shape features and gameplay. So if this game interests you, check the link in the description below. So let's get some of the obvious things out of the way first. The next Mario Kart on Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be a looker. It's going to be a better looking game than what we saw on Wii U or Nintendo Switch. Why? Because the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be a lot more powerful than these consoles. I should add that the Nintendo Switch is just a little bit more powerful than the Wii U, but we're going to be looking at a whole next generational leap here, which we haven't seen in a very long time. So for that reason alone, we should be expecting to see a significant leap in visuals here. We know Nintendo is working with Nvidia, and it's been reported that the Switch 2 will be using DLSS, Deep Learning Super Sampling, which could allow for resolutions up to 4K. Now this will be done through some AI upscaling, so it wouldn't be truly 4K, but essentially it would be kind of like the same difference. And so we could be looking at a very sharp iteration for Mario Kart. We've even seen evidence of HDR support, ray tracing. There are other little things here that could facilitate some nicely improved visuals. And looking at what was accomplished with Mario Kart 8, I would argue that Mario Kart 8 is the best looking Mario Kart game for its respective generation. In my opinion, Mario Kart 8 is one of the more impressive technical feats on the Wii U, and they made it more impressive by fixing the little frame rate issue they had and upping it to 1080p on the Nintendo Switch. But on Switch 2, I would imagine that they will still hold the 60 frames per second. I'll even go as far as saying that when we're playing split screen 4 players, 60 FPS I think will be pretty doable. But going beyond that, what else could be accomplished with the improved hardware? Well, over the generations, the racer count for Mario Kart has gone up. We've been enjoying 12 racers for the last couple of generations, but what if they could up it by just a little bit more? What if we start entertaining the idea of there being 16 racers? Now, one issue with this is that if you do that, you would also have to have stages, tracks, that would be accounting for this. They would have to be wider. That's why the stages are so wide in Mario Kart Wii. So it's possible they don't go in this direction not because they can't, but because they just don't want to make even wider stages for Mario Kart, because if you're making even wider stages, then the turns are likely going to be significantly easier as well, and while Mario Kart has been made to be an accessible series, there is a little bit of a balancing act here, so I think it's a possibility, but I'm not going to outright predict it either. But what I am going to predict is a significant amount of content. If there were to be 16 racers, then you're going to need a significant lineup of characters to choose from. And even at the current 12, you still need a healthy lineup there. But something that I think people forget is that Mario Kart 8 started off not with the 96 tracks we currently have thanks to the Booster Course Pass, but just a base 32 back on Wii U. And then with the DLC, they added 16 more tracks, they brought it to a 48, and then they doubled it with the Booster Course Pass. And they've added more and more characters along the way as well. Some of these characters not even being from the Mario series, but other Nintendo series like Zelda and Animal Crossing and Splatoon. And so there certainly has been this conversation that maybe with the next Mario Kart, it'll be more like a Smash Kart, an ultimate Mario Kart game that includes a whole bunch of tracks and characters from different Nintendo series. Do I think this is going to happen? Well, they started the trend with Mario Kart 8 and they didn't stop with the different updates for Mario Kart 8, so I think that there's certainly a possibility that there will be other Nintendo characters in the next Mario Kart. But I don't necessarily believe it's going to be the focus, because if you start to steer away from it being a Mario Kart game, pun intended there, then you're running the risk of losing the incredible selling power of Mario Kart. If you call it a Smash Kart, I don't know if it's going to do as well. As of September 30th, 2024, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for the Nintendo Switch has sold 64.27 million copies. This is by far the best-selling game on Nintendo Switch, the second most being Animal Crossing New Horizons at 46.45, and then the third best would be Super Smash Bros. Ultimate at 35.14. There is a significant difference there. Now, Smash is still the third best-selling game on Nintendo Switch, so making a Smash Kart would probably not spell doom and gloom for sales, but Mario Kart is the strongest seller across all Nintendo IP. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is the best-selling Nintendo game of all time, not counting Wii Sports, which is a pack-in for Nintendo Wii, which is certainly a very big asterisk there. Point being is that while I think they can include more Nintendo characters and tracks, I think the majority of the game should still be having to do with the Mario series, so it ultimately stays Mario Kart. But is there anything out there that can give us some ideas on what to expect for the next Mario Kart? Well, if we go back to summer of 2013, Game Cult conducted an interview with the director and producer for Mario Kart 8 on Wii U, Hideki Kono and Kosuke Yabuki. And there were a few things said here that I found to be quite interesting. An easy question for starters: how did you decide to integrate reverse gravity in Mario Kart 8? Kosuke Yabuki: many reasons brought about that integration. The first was that I was already director on Mario Kart 7, and we were forced to reduce the number of polygons on screen so that it would work correctly on the handheld console. This time we had less reason to worry about that, and we can obtain a truly polished visual presentation. Next, Nintendo games like F-Zero and Super Mario Galaxy already used anti-gravity in the past. So we started to ask questions about how to reintroduce this idea in Mario Kart, and we realized that we would have to start from scratch to integrate it properly. But the main reason is that Mr. Kano always pushes us to imagine new and interesting things for upcoming games, so there was some pressure. So I actually have several takeaways from what Yabuki said here. 1. On Mario Kart 7, making that game for Nintendo 3DS, given that it was limited hardware, they had to make some compromises. But moving on to Wii U, a significantly more powerful console and at the time was a huge next generational leap, they went on to make the most technically impressive Mario Kart game to date. This is not just a jump over the Nintendo Wii, but also over the Nintendo GameCube. The Nintendo Wii was just slightly more powerful than the Nintendo GameCube, not a traditional generational leap. So once we got to see Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U, we were talking about more than a generational leap here essentially. And it's a very similar situation to the Nintendo Switch. Yes, the Switch is more powerful than the Wii U, but only by a little bit. And so when talking about the Nintendo Switch, we're now looking at another generational plus leap here because of how Nintendo tends to operate. And so there's going to be this opportunity to really push things with the next Mario Kart for Switch 2. And whatever sort of limitations there might have been in Mario Kart 8 for Wii U, well, those limitations should be far gone on Switch 2. But then it's also brought up how prior Nintendo games used anti-gravity, F-Zero and Mario Galaxy, and they wanted to bring something new for this game. And so with that in mind, is there something new that they could bring into the next Mario Kart that might also relate to prior games? That's a big question to ask, and so I will ask you all in the comments below. Is there something that we've seen in other Nintendo games that would make a lot of sense to introduce into the next Mario Kart that would make it feel more fresh and new? And since I'm referencing the comments here, let me also take this moment to ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Now, with this concept in mind of taking certain elements from prior Nintendo games and incorporating it into Switch 2, I want to read another part to his interview that, to me, is highly intriguing. Mario Kart Double Dash introduced an odd idea with 2 characters per vehicle, and that could be interesting to see with the gamepad. Do you foresee tandem courses in a future entry? Kano. When we discuss what we wish to incorporate in a new Mario Kart, this idea sometimes comes on the table. For Mario Kart 7 and 8, we decided not to use it, but it's a request we hear often, so perhaps we can satisfy that desire. So essentially what's being said here is that the Double Dash mechanic, being able to use 2 players per kart, they've considered reusing that concept for both Mario Kart 7 and 8, but ultimately, pun intended there, given the title of the video and what I think this is overall going for here, they considered it. So, will they consider it again for this next Mario Kart on Switch 2? I believe they will. They are already on the record for saying they've considered it twice and will consider it again in the future, so I don't think it's really that much of a stretch. But let me go back to the idea I brought up earlier, where I suggested that thanks to more powerful hardware, they would have the option to increase the racer count. But, as opposed to going towards 16 drivers from 12, what if they still stick with the 12? That way they don't have to change the overall width of the tracks and take away from the maneuverability and the tightness of the turns and all. But instead what they do is that they also offer a double dash mode. This wouldn't be a mandatory way to play the game, but it would be a big option. And so this would actually diversify the type of gameplay you could have in the game. You could have double dash mode and you could have single kart mode. And what this does is that it also brings into the table co-op right out of the gates. And I think this would be a fantastic idea because Mario Kart is already kind of like the quintessential multiplayer game. But with Double Dash mode, that isn't only more of a multiplayer game, but a co-op game. And here's something very interesting about the Switch. The Switch, when you take off the Joy-Cons, they can become single controllers. However, with the Joy-Cons on Switch, they were kind of small controllers and the SL and SR buttons were not the most comfortable even with those little attachments. But from what we've seen of the leaks for Switch 2, the prototype controllers, these Joy-Cons are going to be bigger. We've seen data that suggests that the screen for Switch 2 is going to be bigger, which suggests the tablet will be bigger, which also suggests that whatever Joy-Cons they use would have to be bigger, which supports the idea of the leaks we've seen. And on these leaks, we've seen that the SL and SR buttons, those special side shoulder buttons that only become available when you detach the Joy-Cons, are significantly larger, and thus more comfortable to press and use. I theorize that the Joy-Cons for Switch 2 are going to be much more suited for cooperative play. And so imagine a new Mario Kart coming out very early on into Switch 2's life cycle, perhaps next year, and they're not only touting multiplayer right outside of the box, but also cooperative play, and perhaps their biggest potential seller, Mario Kart, will be pushing both tremendously. I think this might be a fantastic fit. And while it might be tough to imagine new elements being incorporated into Mario Kart, at the very least, if they build upon what they accomplished with Mario Kart 8 already, but also introduce a double dash mode, and having 12 different karts where 2 people can play on each of them, which in theory could support up to 24 people playing at a time, this would be tremendous. Now, that would be a lot of people playing at a time, and so it does also raise the question, how will Nintendo's online play work this time around? Will there be chatting features? Will there be more significant modes online? And I'm leaning in the direction of saying yes. We recently saw that Nintendo was doing a playtest for an actual MMO, and Nintendo has updated their online servers during the generation of Switch. I do believe there is a gearing up here, a preparation for an overall better online infrastructure on Switch 2. Nintendo's even already confirmed to us that your Nintendo Switch online accounts will transfer over to the next console. So I have an optimism that there will certainly be more significant online features that are more well-rounded with the next Mario Kart. Now there's one more point I want to speak on here, and this goes back to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe after the Booster Course Pass having 96 tracks. That is a significant amount of content there. It's going to be hard for Nintendo to release a new Mario Kart that matches up that level of content right from the get-go. I do not expect this. But I also think that they are going to raise the bar for a base amount of content. Mario Kart 8 launched with 32 tracks, which was the standard at the time. That was a pretty healthy amount of tracks. I don't think they're going to launch the next Mario Kart with 32 tracks. I think it's going to be more than that. I'm going to predict that it will be 48, and they will also announce an expansion pass that will be going on for a few years where they continually update on this game, very similar to what we saw with the Booster Course Pass, or even very similar to what we saw with the Fighters Pass in Smash Ultimate. I think coming out right out of the gates with a Mario Kart that already has a significant amount of content, 48 tracks and a variety of characters, and also a double dash mode, I think there's going to be a lot of content to enjoy there, but with the promise of more tracks on the way, they will eventually get back to that 96 number. And it'll be years of continually added new content to Mario Kart throughout the Switch 2 generation. They will continue to push this game and take advantage of the huge sales potential of the Mario Kart brand. Now, some might be concerned that a game like this might take a long time to come out. But something that many of you might find surprising, when I go back to this interview from summer of 2013, it is talked about that they started developing Mario Kart 8 for the Wii U in earnest less than a year prior to this interview, which took place in June of 2013. Mario Kart 8 came out less than a year after this interview. So in terms of the game being in development in earnest, it was less than 2 years. Now, there was a ramp up since the release of Mario Kart 7, so there was some prior work being done before it was being developed in earnest. But Mario Kart 7 came out December 2011. So it was only 2.5 years later that we got to see Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U, and they still delivered a game that had a decent amount of characters with 32 tracks and DLC that came out soon after. So given that we haven't had a brand new Mario Kart technically on a home console since 2014, I have to imagine that they've been able to get some work done. Now, of course, we've gone the Booster Course Pass, and of course there was a content they added with Deluxe, and there was also Mario Kart Tour, and then also Live Circuit, but not all of this was developed fully by the main Mario Kart team. But what has the main Mario Kart team been working on throughout the Switch generation? Well, we know they made ARMS, and there were some efforts in the Booster Course Pass, but what about a full-on project? It's been 7 going on 8 years. I think it's more than reasonable to think that they could have the next Mario Kart ready for next year, which by the way is also Mario's 40th anniversary. We theorize there'll be some big releases for the 40th anniversary, including the next 3D Mario, but also another one that makes a lot of sense, the next big new Mario Kart, a new installment in Nintendo's best-selling game series. I mean, even if somehow it doesn't come out in 2025, it probably will be out by 2026, given the history of early releases and not significant gaps between Mario Kart projects. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.